Good morning. How is everybody this morning? With the cool weather? It's not cold weather, but it's cool weather, right? That's what I've learned to say in South Texas. You don't really have cold friends. You have cool friends, right? So I am Lori Hoggard, and I am the district social worker at Beeville ISD. And actually my counterpart here is Lisa Fuller, and she came along for moral support for me today. And we've been really fortunate at Beeville ISD because now we have 2 mental health workers. For 3 years, it's just been me by myself over 5 campuses, which has been really overwhelming with the rise in teenage anxiety, depression, and suicide. So I've been really lucky to have a counterpart to work with me and provide our students better services. And this presentation is suicide prevention in schools. And as I was looking at it, I thought, I'm not going to change a whole lot because you serve a lot of dual credit students here at CDC. And when we're looking at risk factors and warning signs and all of those things, they're going to be the same. So, all right. And if anybody has any questions, just let me know. Okay, so we're going to look at some statistics. So suicide is the second leading cause of death for ages 10 to 14. It's overwhelming, isn't it? And then third leading cause of death for ages 15 to 24. Second leading cause of death for ages 25 to 34. And then you can see those other statistics. I believe I read a statistic recently from the CDC where it said 10 and under, it was the 9th leading cause of death. And that is just shocking. And so we really need to be providing better mental health services. We need to be more aware of the warning signs and the resources that we can do to help our youth and staff. We have staff at Beeville ISD that can utilize our services because suicide touches everyone. And I wanted to also give you a little warning trigger. Some of this stuff I know is heavy and it's sensitive. And so if anybody feels like they need to get up and step out, feel free to. And take a break if you need to. Okay. So any member of the school community, student or adult, can prevent a student from dying by suicide. Any member of a larger community can be affected by an attempted suicide or suicide death of a student or a school staff member. And when we're looking at it, I would say in this school year, we've probably averaged 1 student a week that's had an outcry. And so we go through our crisis intervention. One of the things that we really have noticed in this area is, and it's all over, but in South Texas there's a lack of mental health services. We have waiting lists that go anywhere from 6 weeks to 6 months. So if you have a youth, anybody that's getting out of a crisis hospitalization, and they have to wait 6 months for a intervention, that's not a good thing. So one of the things we do have at Beeville ISD is we have an MOU with San Antonio, University of San Antonio, UT Health, and they Texas has a grant for 2 years, and they provide mental health services free for our students at Beeville ISD. So if you do have a dual credit student that you know that is struggling, you can always reach out to the counselor. They know those services, but we've been fortunate because those services are 70% of services therapy that is received successfully actually do it on the school campus. So we bring that student, we get consent from the parent, of course, and then we fill out the application and we send it, and they are really good to get back with us. If I send a referral out, within 2 weeks, we have that student is receiving services. They do it on campus, it's confidential, and they're not counted absent. So that's really good for them because if they go to Corpus, you're thinking that's half a day that they're missing school, the parent is having to come out, and so it's less likely with those barriers that they're going to receive the services they need. So I'm continuously asking this T-Chat program if they're going to extend their services out to individuals older than 18, like when they leave school, if they're in college. The U.S. Surgeon General actually called to action to prevent suicide, in which he framed suicide as a preventable public health problem. The assumption is that if everyone takes responsibility for recognizing and responding to a suicide risk, then the majority of suicides can be prevented. Prevention of youth suicide should be addressed where our youth spend most of their day at school, and it's crucial for all school staff to be familiar with watchful for risk factors and warning signs of suicidal behaviors. A suicide contagion. A suicide contagion is described as an imitative behavior where one death by suicide is contributing factor to another suicide death. Suicide contagions is relatively rare and accounts for between 1% and 5% of all deaths by suicide annually. But that is one of the things, if there was a suicide in a school or around in a community, you would be aware that that is a possibility. School personnel should be aware of the possibility of a suicide contagion because it occurs almost exclusively with adolescents. And between 100 and 200 students die each year in clusters. And when we look, there is a capacity for suicide. It's termed by, the capacity for suicide is coined by Thomas Joyner in his interpersonal theory of suicide. So Joyner refers to the capacity of suicide as an individual's ability to kill themselves, as humans are biologically, we're wired for self-preservation. Joyner's theory is that one must develop the capacity for suicide where they no longer fear pain, self-mutilation, or death. So one of the risk factors for suicide is self-harm. And self-harm can be in many different forms. We often think about cutting, but it could be pinching, using needles, bruising yourself. So there are several different forms of self-harm. And we actually see that in very young ages. I mean, like junior high, we start seeing that come out. And then that is kind of a contagion right there. We don't ever do treatment for self-harm in a group because there's more of a percentage that is going to occur and grow within that group. Students who injure or mutilate may be developing the capacity for suicide. Joyner's theory suggests that along with the capacity for suicide, suicide individuals must have a desire to die. He believes that the desire to die includes risk factors which are experienced immensely for an extended period of time, and they perceive themselves as burdensomeness and a sense of low belongingness. And those are two things. Like you may hear somebody say, nobody would know if I wasn't here. And then you see those people that don't feel like they belong anywhere and don't have that support system. When the desire to die and the capacity for suicide are both present, the scale may be tipped and the suicide attempt may occur. So when you see those both together, there's more likely that the suicide could occur. And we're looking, risk factors are what we refer to as an individual's characteristics, circumstances, and history and experience that raise their statistical risk for suicide. And warning signs are those visual signs that a friend or loved one may be indicating that they may be in a crisis or thinking about suicide. Warning signs are not always there, but I think later statistically it says in 50 to 70% of the situations there were warning signs. That's how we can be aware of this, and we can help and hopefully begin to prevent suicide. Males are 4 times more likely to die by suicide than females. That's usually females attempt more, but males, because of the means that they choose, are more violent. Race, Caucasians have the highest rates for all ages, and then followed by American Indians and Alaskan Natives. And then you have your gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender group, and there's a lot of harassment, bullying, and rejection there. Chronic mental illnesses is another risk factor. So in psychiatric disorders, 90% of those who die by suicide have some sort of diagnosable and treatable mental illness. Anxiety and post-traumatic stress disorder. Anxiety is like almost every student that comes in is just over the top. And I, people say, why does that happen? And I think social media does contribute to it, but I think also today our teenagers have so much, I feel, more stress, our youth, than we did when we were younger, as far as competitiveness, dual credit. They're in high school and they've got all these things. They play sports, and so they become very overwhelmed. So when I see a student or a person, the two things that I really pay attention to is if they feel hopelessness or overwhelmness, along with that burdensome, and not feeling like you belong anywhere. Another continued on risk factors, previous attempts. 20% of those who kill themselves previously attempted suicide. Genetic predisposition, self-injury, behavior of self-destruction, alcohol or drug dependence, impulsivity, aggressiveness, and low self-esteem. These are the social and environmental risk factors, so lack of connectedness, history of sexual abuse and childhood trauma. And we know some children, they experience more than one trauma. A really good report to read is Adverse Child Effects, and it talks about how trauma affects, the more trauma that you experience, the more likely you are to develop a mental illness and physical illness. Pressure to be a good student, athlete, child. And I know, just reading in the news before, I remember, was it a volleyball player or a soccer player that committed suicide? And so it's there, and sometimes those are the people we overlook because we think, they're doing so good, they're this, but we don't really see. One of the things I think about is, remember Robin Williams? When people say, things, and it's like he was famous. He, was humorous, and then he died by suicide. And so that's why it's really important to pay attention to these and to be aware. Access to alcohol or illicit drugs, easy access to lethal methods, especially guns, exposure to a suicide loss, trouble with the law. And sometimes that just happens, and I know one of my son's best friends, his dad died by suicide. He got in trouble with the law. Very good guy, couldn't see past it. And he went and committed suicide and left behind, two beautiful children and his wife, just because he couldn't get past that at that point. Bullying, and that means if you bully or if you're being bullied, it increases your rate, a risk factor for suicide. Poor familial communications or parent-child discord, family stress or dysfunction, romantic difficulties in older adolescents, and I see that a lot. We'll have a student that comes in and they, just went through a breakup, and sometimes their parent is saying, this is you'll get past this, it's nothing, but for them it's everything, because that's where they are in their development, and those relationships are very important to them. And so as adults, sometimes we minimize that loss and just think, you'll get past that, it's no big deal. Being risk-taking or being reckless. So some of the warning signs. Suicide can be prevented, while some suicides occur without warning. 50 to 70% of people who are suicidal give us some warning. A lot of times it's on social media. I had actually a student who contacted her school counselor at the junior high to say that she had saw something on I think it's the Discord platform. I think that's a gaming platform. And so this particular student had put on there that he planned to commit suicide. So she saw that, reported it to her counselor, who then reported it to us so we could intervene. And of course, we called the parents in. This parent was very responsive. We now have him on T-Chat. We had him assessed, made that safety plan with him, and now he's receiving T-Chat services. So lots of times when there's an outcry, it is on social media. Other ways, we've had students that it'll be in their writings, like when they do an assignment, or it will be like we had one and he actually drew a picture and had his name on the tombstone, which is very eye-opening. And so it's just, there's a lot of different warning signs out there. And of course, unfortunately, sometimes there are more warning signs. Suicidal threats in the form of direct or indirect statements. This year I've actually had 3 or 4 students that a teacher has said, I'm sending this student to you ASAP, or come get this student, and then they'll send me a message and they'll be like, I heard them say, I just want to die. And so I had 2 students in one day actually that a teacher had sent, and they were like, Miss, I don't want to die, and I'm just saying that. And I said, I understand, but we're sensitive to that these days because of the risk, so we take that seriously, and we talked about it and how they could use maybe better words to communicate how they feel, but in respect that the teacher was worried about them and wanted to make sure that they were okay. So suicide notes or plans, self-defeating statements or expressions like I wish to die or I'd be better off dead. Seeking suicidal means such as guns and pills, hopelessness about the future, getting better, they're not making plans for the future anymore, feelings of worthlessness, they'll have trouble concentrating, indecisiveness, or, like we said, we may see preoccupation with suicide, death in music, movies, and books. Warning signs continued feelings of being a burden to others, a lack of connection, withdrawing from friends and family, feeling depressed and overwhelmed, loss of energy or fatigue, loss of interest or pleasure in usual activities or sports. They feel like there's no reason for living, discussing suicide in their writings, in reference being dead, even joking about it, or referencing to one's funeral. So those are all warning signs that we can look out for. Internet researching methods for watching suicide, self-harm documentaries, increased hostility, agitation, defensiveness, anger, rage, maybe a hostile, if afraid you'll uncover a suicidal plan, they may be mad at you because they don't want you to figure out their plan. Disinterest in making future plans, or the opposite, that euphoria, where they all of a sudden are just happy. You've had this depressed person that's all of a sudden just happy, nothing's wrong, and they seem energetic, but lots of times it's because they've made that decision and they're comfortable with it. I'm going to go ahead and die by suicide. And so that is one of those things that if you see somebody that's actually been really, really depressed and you've been really concerned about them, and then all of a sudden they're feeling great, you may check in on that person. Anxiety and inner tension. I think most of the kids that come to us are anxious. I had a student the other day, she is an athlete. She comes from a good socioeconomic background. She is a straight A student and she's depressed. And she said, I feel guilty. And I said, well, why do you feel guilty? She said, Miss, I have nothing to feel depressed about. She said, I have everything, and I would not want my parents to know that because I don't want them to think this is their fault. And that's a lot to hold on to. And so we talked about that and how her parents would want to know so that they could help her. Because just because you have everything and you feel like you shouldn't be, doesn't mean you don't have a genetic disposition for that. So I really felt bad for her because she was thinking more about her parents than she was herself and how that would make them feel. Because honestly, sometimes when we do call in a parent, they do feel like, what have I done? You know, like I should be parenting better, or this is my fault. And it's like, we don't blame here. What we do is we give this individual the help that they need and the support that they need. You may see deterioration of self-care, decreased school attendance, or academic performance. I know if we have a student that we're worried about and then we don't see them for a couple of days, we're like reaching out, like where are they at, what's going on, or we make contact with the parent. Change in eating habits, sleep routine is a big issue, change in behavior, increased use of drug and alcohol, sex, that would be some risk-taking behaviors again, increased impulsiveness, can't say that this morning, and taking unnecessary risks, or feeling humiliated, like I talked about that parent earlier who was in trouble with the law and just felt humiliated by his choices, and that people in the community were aware and just couldn't see past that getting better. And so when we look at warning signs and risk factors, then we kind of balance out and say, okay, what protective factors does this individual have? And the presence of protective factors can lessen the potential of risk factors leading to suicidal thoughts and behaviors. Protective factors are often the opposite of risk factors and can buffer the effects of the risks. Students who possess multiple protective factors are able to bounce back in the face of adversity and are often said to be resilient. They have that inner locus control inside of them. Positive self-esteem and emotional wellness, physical health, they have hope for the future. So many of our students today, when you ask them, like, what are your plans? What are you going to do? Some of them just don't. They just don't have that plan for the future, and so, or they can't see it. I had a student the other day, and he was just couldn't even think about school because he said his mom was like 4 months behind in rent, and it was just mom and him in the house, and he's in high school. So he has this responsibility that he needs to be taking care of her, and so he just wants to like quit school so he can go to work and help her pay the rent, which is so sweet of him to think that, but at his age, he should be feeling that responsibility, and we see that a lot. Let's see. Easy access to effective mental health support. Like I addressed earlier, we just don't have that here. I know a lot of parents will think their child is receiving therapy because there's confusion, because there's so many services. When you get therapy, there's case management, there's medication management, there's therapy, there's like life skills. And so like our local mental health facility here does not have an LPC currently. And so we refer a lot to them, but they're getting case management services. And if they do have one, then what they do is they, and I can't remember, Lisa, if they still do or not because they come and go so much, but you have to be graded to get services from the LPC. So you'd have to be like a level 3. So that means a level 3 would be like you were suicidal, that would be the highest. And so they don't have those services here. We have, I'm trying to think, Brenda Bond. I don't think she's currently taking patients, Stitch and then Serenity. And so they're all great services. It's just we need more in this area. And so until then, we're going to continue to try to look for other resources. Effective coping skills. And sometimes I say we're all just one coping strategy away from, when you just get overwhelmed and it overtakes you. Effective problem-solving skills in the face of conflict or adversity. We're actually starting to do some programs at the school, some SEL programs. Lisa and I went to Dallas for a week, and we did a training in YAM, which is Youth Awareness and Mental Health. And we're going to start at the junior high level because a lot of our students need that SEL. They need to know how to problem solve and conflict resolution and how to communicate their feelings. So that's one area we're going to start building in. Let's see. Cultural and religious beliefs that affirm life and discourage suicide. Resilience and trust that things will get better. And a general life satisfaction, sense of purpose. So these are all ways we can look if the student or the person that we're dealing with has these factors, it will decrease the likelihood that they will die by suicide. Sense of connectedness, having social support such as family, friends, and teammates. Having at least one caring adult to which a student can turn to. And I really feel that way. We always say that at Beeville ISD is like if that student has one caring adult, it can make a difference. And so that's the way it is with instructors, coaches, everybody. If they reach out and they just have one person that listens. Yesterday I did some professional development, and we did it on SELs, and one of our teachers shared that they had a student, and I believe the dad told me he wouldn't ever be able to play the guitar. Like, you just don't even try it because you'll never be able to do it. And so he came to school and he told her, I can't do it. My dad said I'd never be able to do it. And she said, I believe in you. You can do this. And so he's learning how to play the guitar. And she said, and I can't wait till he learns because I want to show Dad, look, he can do this, And so sometimes our youth don't have that encouragement. And so being that one person makes all the difference. I have a couple I'd take home. My husband would probably argue with me, but I've got a couple of students at the ISD that I would take home with me. Of course, my daughter would probably argue with me too. So, restricted access to suicide means such as guns and medication. And this is one of those areas I know, because we live in Texas, we live, everybody has guns. I have guns in my house. However, sometimes parents will be like, they hunt, and they're like, they know not to touch that. And I'm like, not when they're in that mental health mode. They don't know that. So please make sure you lock those up. The same with medications, knives. I mean, we do a safety plan. That's the area we hit. Is okay, let's look at means and access to means, and sometimes they don't even think about it. When I think about self-harm, we have students that, I actually had a student, she couldn't wear jewelry anymore because she would go in the bathroom and she would cut with the jewelry, but they come in with bread ties, so they get really creative, and it's hard to watch all that, but doing the obvious ones like the guns and the medicine are the best ways to start. Okay, outdoor. So some of the things, what do I say? And a lot of that was in that video because it is something that's uncomfortable. I mean, when a student or a person comes to you and says that, it's like, oh, what do I say, what do I do? And because it's so serious and it's so heavy on you, and these days it's a lot more easier for me to say it because, of course, I deal with it on at least a weekly basis, sometimes, if not, if not monthly. And so I've become more comfortable with saying that and asking the questions. But teachers and staff often report not knowing what to say when a student approaches them. I appreciate you trusting me, now I want to get you help. Like, how can we get you some help? I can only imagine how you might feel. No one should be in this much pain. And I think that's right, nobody should feel that way. So let's get you some help. Those are all helpful things to say. What do I say? I'm honored that you felt that you could come to me, that they trusted you, that you were that safe person. Now we can get you help you need so you don't have to continue to hurt like this. I'm sorry that you've had to suffer. Please let you know that there's help out there. Let's find some for you. I understand what not to say. There's a lot of things. I understand what you're going through. It's kind of what they kind of said on that video. It may stop and they may become defensive because you may not know everything that they're dealing with at home or at school, in the community. So sometimes that will kind of stop and break that rapport. And that intent might backfire on you. You should think of the positive. In that situation, it's really hard for people to think about the positive, right? They're feeling hopeless, overwhelmed. It's hard to pull out the positives. Students may feel that they are being criticized and become defensive. The student may feel that they are wrong in the way that they're thinking. Your parents would be mad to hear you say that. This statement is similar to the previous example. The last thing a suicidal student needs is to feel ostracized or disparaged further. A better statement would be, your parents would not want you to hurt like this. Consider all that you have to live for. Again, they can't see it right then. A student may feel that they do not have anything to live for. To tell them otherwise in the middle of a suicidal crisis can do more damage and deepen the feeling that no one understands them. At this time, like this, it is more helpful to demonstrate compassion, validate students' feelings, and reinforce the student for their courage in sharing these difficult feelings. And I know we keep saying students, but that's anybody, anybody that we're dealing with, a friend, a relative, that these are the things they lots of times just need to know that somebody cares and to help them get help. I'll be right back. Never say I'll be right back. The person's saying they're suicidal. You say, hey, come with me. Let's get you some help now. But don't leave them alone. And I know here, in talking to Dr. Jones, they have a care team. So you could reach out to that care team and let them know, or take the student directly to student services, something like that, and then you can work together to make a plan together on how to help that student. Okay. To the end, I wanted to say a few things. In July, as far as resources, in July they came out with 988. So instead of the 1-800-TALK, this is easier to remember. It's kind of 911 or the 212, but so 988, and I'll leave some of these cards with you, Dr. Jones. Easy thing to remember. There is a text line, and we actually have tried it out. We text 741, was it help? Or home, all capital letters. And they responded to us in 10 seconds. So what those lines are is there is a certified crisis worker on the other side of those lines 24/7 to help you get resources, to talk to you, and to listen. There's the Trevor the Trevor Project, yes. So there's a lot of resources out there, and students just need to know to be aware. We did, September was Suicide Awareness Month, and so we just kind of coming out of it. Now it's unity and bullying. So being at the school, we're always working on something for awareness. But we handed out these for the students, just some information, and just let them know what resources are out there and where they can come for support. So I thank you all for coming. I hope this was informational for you, and if you ever need anything, just let us know. I feel like we're a community and we need to help our youth wherever they're at. So thank you very much.